good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the West is the Best podcast. Today, we're going to be exploring a couple different topics. We have several guests with us. Quick introductions. We have Anne from Alaska, Marla from Alaska also, and Emily from Wyoming. So, Anne, remind me, I totally just forgot how to say your last name.
Kowenstrodt.
Kowenstrodt. Thank you so much. She is our Alaska 4-H Association president. Marla Lowder from, the District of Tanana. Perfect. Awesome. So you're in Alaska. And we have Emily Swinyer from Wyoming, and you are in Sheridan County, correct?
Yep.
Great. So today's topic, we're going to be looking at the question, how much do we do as professionals versus our volunteers? So essentially, where does our work begin and where does the work of volunteers end? Welcome, everyone.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Alan and Megan are here too.
Hi.
Oh, yes. And as of course, we have Megan and Alan joining us. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Excited to talk about this subject.
Full disclosure, Emily kind of reached out and identified herself as my mentee a couple years ago. And this was a conversation that Emily and I have probably at least minimum once a month about, it's not my work. It's not anything that Megan has anything to do with other than sincere appreciation from Dr. Jim Rutledge. He is a retired 4-H professional who has been a part of this work from every angle, a 4-H member, a 4-H volunteer and parent. He was also a county agent, area specialist, state specialist, and now he's a member of the life committee for NAE 4-H YDP. He owns this. This is all his thoughts. I asked him if he would ever consider doing a podcast with me and on this topic, and he said no. So he only wants to do it in person. And so I am not going to do him justice at all. But really, when we think about where we're at as a 4-H professional, it really influences the capacity of our program. And we don't begin as experts in volunteer management. None of us, believe it or not, get hired on in this profession with any experience as a volunteer manager. And we go through developmental stages just like our kids do. So those were two of my favoriteest quotes from him. And so if we think about the development of 4-H professionals in a pyramid shape, if you will, like we have to start at the bottom of the pyramid, like in any other normal job. And then the more experience we have, the more easy it is to move up the ladder or the pyramid, if you will. So we are taught the job as we do the job. We learn by doing, like 4-H. So Dr. Jim Rutledge identifies 4 levels of educators. The first lowest level, the beginner level, if you will, is servant leadership. And they view their volunteers as the recipient of our efforts. And our capacity is programmatically is quite limited. The next stage, stage 2, is the educator. And the volunteers are learners. So we are there to teach them what we want them to do. Finally, the third stage is manager, and our volunteers we view them as teachers. So we're starting to expand our program a bit more. But when we enter that 4th stage, the final stage is leader. That's when we see the volunteers as our partners or middle managers. And then we can do so much more because of how we choose to utilize our volunteers. So first stage, the service stage, this is where we all come in, regardless of our experience outside of our current county. This is where we all start. So the 4-H educator or professional is doing things for the volunteers and the program. This is my program is our attitude. I have to learn everything there is to know about this program, and really just building relationships and trust. The volunteers are the recipient of our service, and they're not really engaged in any decision making or leadership. They are kind of just objects there for us to use and abuse.
Well, and if I could jump in, Megan, I'm curious to ask on this first stage, all of the people here that we have as guests, that you have been an extension for varying amounts of time. And I know from my experience, when I first started as a 4-H professional, volunteers would come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm not paid for my time. You're paid." And there's that, delivery mode of where our organization thrives and lives off of volunteer work. So what are your thoughts on how to start out, like your advice to start out for the 4-H professionals who are starting out? What would be your advice in this stage one of you're providing service to volunteers and developing those relationships? What advice do you have?
Well, I don't remember that long ago. My advice is probably going to get farther down in the stages, but you want to build a relationship with your volunteers, right? They are your team, but you're not their servant all the time. There's sometimes you're going to have to do stuff. That is true. But there's times they need to do stuff. And it took me a while to figure out when they come in, because every volunteer, and your new volunteers are even worse because they have all these great ideas, right? We want to do these, we want to do this. And you try at first to help or to do them. Yeah, these are great ideas. Let's do them. I think we can do it. And you're going to work 60, 80 hours a week trying to do that. And you're going to go from there to burnout real quick. The balance that you need to come in with this is, and if someone walks in to my office with a great idea, I look at them and I say, how can I help you do that?
Yeah.
And put it back on them. You have to be forthright, honest with them. I don't have the time to do everything that everybody wants me to do, but it's a great idea and I think you can accomplish it. How can I help you get it done? So that's not the servant relationship, because I jumped over it, but yeah, you've got to build that trust with them to begin with before you can start to do that, though.
Absolutely. And that totally makes sense. And it's good to have that awareness starting off.
I think it also, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump in here. I agree with Marla with the conversation to have with newbies that are coming in that want to be volunteers in our 4-H programs, but also, a lot of us have moved from program to program. And so not many have started a program from scratch where all of your volunteers are new to 4-H. I mean, even if you're starting a program from scratch, you're still going to get folks that have come in that have had experience in 4-H. And so I think we're always going to have these different stages of roles within our programs because we are going to have different levels of volunteers that are coming into our programs.
Absolutely. The one thing that I would like to chime in, I guess I'm probably the newest in the bunch by like a lot. I was only hired back in 2018, so I'm still transitioning out of this role. But I think it's really important for us to think about each county or region that you're working with. They start with different expectations too. So it's not just you and your skill set that you're bringing. You're meeting that with where they are and their expectations. So for us, there had not been an educator for 9 months. And the one before, she had a different skill set than I brought.
Right.
And there were all these expectations, and her background was in animal science and very heavy on the ag. And I came from a classroom, came from a school. And so my expertise was not hers. And at the same time, I could do classroom management, but when I'm dealing with a bunch of volunteers that I can't own to sit down and pay attention,
You could try.
And so my skill set was different. So I'm meeting their expectations head on. So I'm a disappointment. I'm not what they wanted at all. And they'll still tell me that. It's kind of weird. But at the same time, being forthcoming with saying, this is what I have to offer. And one of the most empowering kind of a shifting piece was, obviously you're building those relationships, but then when you say you're the expert here, and I need you. This is what you signed up to do. I want to help you do it, but I cannot do it. It's been really empowering for them to know that I don't want to take it from them. I don't want to be the horse superintendent. Please, no. I do not. I will promote whatever you're doing. I will give you whatever resources you need. But you're the expert. And to see them kind of carry that banner and be like, oh, okay, all right, I can do this. And to realize that we're not at odds with each other, that we're actually on the same team. That's been a really fun, it's probably happened within the last year where I've just been able to, here you go. Which has really been hard for me too, because back to this, I want to do it. I want to do all the things. You want to prove that you're worthy and that what you have is, and then at some point you're like, this is what I have to offer you. It's very limited. This is it.
I love that each one of you have really focused on those relationships, because that's really, there was an analogy that I read once, how I believe it was Henry Ford said that he's going to be the one to make the relationships with the experts. Like, he doesn't need to be everything to everybody. And that's how he made a successful car making company. Like, it's a similar thing that we are one person. We only have enough capacity to do certain things or specialize in certain things. And, and we may be talking about burnout here in the next little bit, but that's a huge thing to consider. Absolutely. Remember what you bring to the table, and then working with the volunteers to see what they bring to the table, and see how you can make that amazing youth development happen that we're known for, And
I think that empowerment is important to kind of give them ownership and buy-in of it, because you have that conversation of, well, I'm just the volunteer. You're the one that's paid to do this. Yeah, but when they have that earnest buy-in, when it matters to them at a different level, then it's not you're begging them to help. It's they're knocking down your door. It just becomes like becomes like a personality trait.
Right.
It's so much a part of who they are and their identity that but that buy-in, that's really when they feel supported and it matters, and they know that they have somebody in the position that's going to stand behind them. And those great ideas, like Marla said, that's the piece that's really important and hard to get to.
It's that quote about no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is the phrase I think of a lot in this stage of the development. Emily, I have to point out too, told me once that she felt on trial during this phase of her employment, because she was so new that she was trying to prove her worthiness of the position, prove that she deserved that position, that she knew what she was doing. Even in the back of her mind, she did not know what she was doing, but she wanted everyone to think she had it all put together and figured out.
That was exhausting and a complete waste of time, to be clear. That was dumb. But it was, I have people and they're very forthcoming and to say, well, honestly, I really didn't think we should have hired you. We should have gone with the other guy. And they'll tell me this. And I'm sitting here like, all right, well, glad we didn't do what you wanted. What do I even say to that? Because I'm sitting here.
Right.
So it definitely was, I had people who wanted to see me fail. I don't know if it was what they really wanted because they knew they needed someone in the position that they didn't want to do it. But I don't know. I felt like I felt like I was sitting in a trial of,
Sitting in an electric chair,
yeah.
waiting
And
for the switch to go.
it finally took me, I don't remember who told me, but they were like, you don't have to light yourself on fire to keep everybody else warm, because then there's nothing left.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I felt like that's what I was doing. I was trying to work full time. I have 2 small children, a husband, a farm, trying to do all of these things. And the people that mattered most to me got the worst of me.
Yeah. That is amazing. That is, well, and that, thank you for sharing that. That is, and I know you're not the only one in extension. That's happened. Like, it's such a difficult position to be in when you feel like you are needing to be this role, and you're torn in so many directions, and you still have a life outside of work.
Right. And,
right.
And the agent before me, she didn't have a lot of boundaries. She was accessible all the time, which made people love her. But at the same time, she's not here anymore.
Right.
I'm a different person.
And so it was an immediate thing. I realized that if I didn't set some hard boundaries real quick and in a hurry, the seat would be empty again.
Right.
Which they didn't like that. The volunteers did not like that I was not reachable at 6:30 a.m. or 10:30 at night.
Right. But again, that's hard work. You know, that is absolutely hard work. And then, like, I liked what you said earlier as well, that it depends on your region. You know, your county might be 2,000 people, it might be 500,000 people, and that brings its own, I'm currently in a county with over 500,000 people, and I don't have to worry about running into people at the grocery store necessarily. It might still happen, but it's very rare. But if I'm living in a county of 2,000, I'm probably going to be running into the people I work with, and so it's, I would say it's more difficult to set those boundaries when you're in a county with a lower population, because you are probably the only youth development organization in town. Maybe there's scouts, maybe there's, other organizations, but, there's sports and all of that, but it's, definitely the stage 1 can be very difficult.
I still have volunteers who'll call me after hours, because I never gave my cell phone number out, but when I travel with kids, I have to give my cell phone number out. So now my cell phone number is all over the place, right? And they'll call me at 6:30, 7:30 at night, ask me questions. And the first thing they do is they'll start, well, I know it's after hours and I hate to do this, and I'll respond to them and I say, why are you calling me then? Don't ask me. Can't it wait till tomorrow morning and call me then? And most of the time it can. They're just like, oh, I just wanted to get it done. I said, that's okay. You have a life. I have a life.
So
I'm sorry.
You guys hit on, sorry, Marcella, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So we talked earlier about analogies. This whole conversation right now reminds me of the chicken and the pig. As far as our commitments and our true understanding of what we give and where we're at. So if you're unfamiliar with the analogy, the story goes, there's a chicken and a pig, and they hear that the farmer's going to come to visit them. So they're like, oh, let's cook breakfast for them. Okay, let's do ham and eggs. The chicken's like, okay, here's my eggs. Here, go ahead and utilize it. And then the pig's like, well, for us to get ham, like, I got to give my life to the commitment that we're going to do. So that's a part where we have to understand what we're committing and what part other people are committing, because sometimes it comes back to, like Emily said, comes back to our lives. And we do have to have that I don't want to say balance, because it's never going to be a balance, but that give and take and understanding of how and when, and having those healthy boundaries before it becomes burnout, and having the people around us to check us and saying, hey, is that a good decision? Because we're told we have to say yes so many times, but we're not told we need to say no also. And having that conversation of, we're people too, and we need to make sure that we're serving ourselves, because you can't pour from an empty glass.
I totally agree with you, Marcella. And I think the wording is important, and that, balance is thrown out there all the time. And none of us anywhere has a balance. I mean, what does that mean, really? But I think the key word that you said there was the understanding, and that you need to develop this relationship with your volunteers to, they will so that they can understand you and your life and your family and needs outside of the office. Even if I'm answering an email at 9 o'clock at night, I do scan them. Some I answer, some I don't. It just depends. But then we also have to understand their lives as well, and the expectations that we have for them in their role as a volunteer for our program, I think.
The other thing to talk about, and you guys have kind of danced all around it, so let's just hit it on the head. This is the stage where burnout is very common, and Marcella can speak to this a bit more, is that when you begin your new career, you're very excited. You want to do all the 4-H things, and you realize very quickly you're working all the time. And a lot of folks don't get past this early stage because the burnout is so real. And I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak to that burnout thing, because it will come up in all the things. All the phases will have an element of burnout. But this one in particular, when you're fresh into a new county, this one really is strong, because there's so many things and programs and elements to wrap your arms around, and you're learning. So thoughts on early career burnout?
It makes me sad because I see so many good professionals come into our organization, and somehow they are not mentored, or they don't get the help or whatnot, and they do burn out, and we probably lose at least half, if not more, in this stage. And that affects our longevity as far as a cooperative extension 4-H program. But it does make me sad. And I think we're terrible at this up here. I shouldn't say that, but we are. Every new person who comes on should get a mentor. Someone they can call and talk and say, I need your opinion, or vent. Everybody
They need a
needs to
Megan.
vent. Yeah.
They need a Megan.
And it's easier, and I hate to say this because this is not right to say, but it's easier for someone who is single to come on and do this, because they don't have another commitment at home to go to. And so if they're passionate, they will give their life to it and do it till they get it figured out. But if they have other commitments, it's frustrating because they're being pulled. But I also see nowadays with the younger generation that, they don't want to work like I worked when I started 20 years ago. I don't want to work like I worked. So there's got to be this fine balance so we don't get burnout. And these poor young people, I want them to succeed. However we can. I think we need to give them mentors, even if it's from another state.
One thing I noticed with getting hired is, the educator before me was single, and she got married and promptly quit.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I've noticed is the group, my kind of cohort that I was hired with, there's like 2 of us left, because they got married and they had babies, which is wonderful. But how tragic is it that we feel like we cannot have a marriage and children? We can't be a mom or a dad and do this job. That's tragic. That is terrible. And so, I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that now are old enough to participate. So now I'm not just doing my jobs, I'm also being 4-H mom and running them to practice or a workshop or a clinic. And so the putty is already stretched thin, and now it's just, so thank God for 2020. It was a reset. I know, I said it. It was a reset for my family. We were all home. My husband is a coal miner. We were all furloughed. We were all at home. My children were at home. We spent all day, every day together, all the time. And it was great because it reminded me of what was important.
Sure.
And so now my children get out of school every day at 3:00. I leave my office at 3:00 every day. And I go be mom, and I take them home and we work on their 4-H projects. We go to the grocery store. I make sure they have food to eat and clothes to wear. I wash clothes and do dishes. And then we come back for council or their project meetings. It took about a year for my office staff and for my county folks and parents to really understand that, no, I'm really going to leave at 3.
Right.
I'll be back, but I'm really going to do it. Because it was to the point I'm like, I haven't washed clothes in 2 weeks. We're going to have cereal for dinner again.
Right.
Like it wasn't just my burnout I was worried about. My children were like, I don't want to go to your office after school today again for 3 hours. That's not fair to them.
Yeah.
And so no wonder they leave when they have babies, because you can't bring them to work with you. What are you going to do? You're here for 8 hours a day. You still need to be mom. That's the most important part of your life. Maybe.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up to that. I really like something that Marla said. You mentioned you want new 4-H professionals to be successful. And so how would y'all define success? What does it mean to be a successful 4-H professional? Because, like we just went through, starting as a new 4-H professional, there's so many amazing, good, excellent things that you are doing, and you have to pick and choose. And so, because again, you're only one person, you have a finite amount of time. So how would you describe success, especially for the new people coming into this job, to this career? How would you see success happen for them?
I think one thing that Marla said that would help with success as a new professional is that mentorship, is someone that has been in the system. Your area might have different dynamics than that mentor has, but they can give you structure and how to develop those relationships with your volunteers and what has worked for them. I'm always thankful when people share information that way instead of you need to do it this way. It's this is what has worked for me in my area with these, constraints that I work around, and, try it and see if it would work for you as well. But I think that is important and would point toward success, is to have that relationship with other staff members as you start your career and figuring out how to manage volunteers and support them in their clubs.
I like that a lot. Any other thoughts on how would you define success, especially, with everything that we've experienced in this past 2 years and having that opportunity to reset, that is a real thing as well. We had this opportunity to redefine what our jobs look like, or how we are reaching the needs, like you just said, meeting the needs of the volunteers of our clubs, our community, our world, all of it. How do we define that success?
Well, no one can really define success except for you, right? You are the one.
Right.
You are the one who decides what your success is. And I'm going to back up, and I'm sorry, Emily, right? Is it Emily? I want to applaud her. Good for you. Set that boundary at 3:00. Go home and be mom. That is so important, because you are right. Family comes first. And I got married a few years ago, and I used to give all to the job. And I told people, they're like, oh, let's find you a spouse. Let's get you married. We think you're cool. Have fun with it. And I said, fine. But here's the deal. When that happens, my life is changing. And you need to know that. And when I got married, it changed. And they're like, but wait. And I said, I warned you all the way around. You are no longer number one in my life. So applaud you, Emily, on that one. Back to success. Anyone, you have to decide what your success is going to be, what it's going to look like. Do I want to have 40 clubs and no programs, or do I want a couple of programs and 20 clubs? And quantity versus quality. I know we're all pushed for numbers. I'm not a numbers person. Yeah, I want lots of numbers, but I want quantity programs. I want quantity volunteers, quantity kids who are enjoying the program and learning from it and are going to become our future. Not just a kid that walks in the door, does one thing and leaves. Yeah, those are great, and I don't deny those, but I want quantity programming.
And the in-depth impact that you have on those members that really sink their teeth into everything that it has to offer, as well as the volunteers. Half the time I feel like the volunteers get just as much fulfillment and like the purpose that the kids get. I mean, the kids are getting all of those developmental things, but as an adult woman, I need to feel valued. I need to feel like I have something to offer other than holding this chair down in my office. And to give our leaders that sense of purpose and for them to feel needed, that's that buy-in for them to know that I need you to do this. Those kids that show up at those meetings, they don't know how to crochet and I don't know how to crochet and I can't teach them, but you do. And they come not for me, because I'm not even there. They come for you and that valuable relationship that they have with you, not me. I'm just the one that sends the email. Crocheting practices today. That's not, I am not the one. They are the one. But when they feel that purpose, that's you've set the bait. You've set the so just slightly passionate about it.
It's good. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because there are many 4-H professionals that are going through similar feelings, even though, and I want to make a shout out. There's people who are single and still need, like, we all need to have a life, even if you aren't married, even if you don't have kids, this is so applicable to everyone. We cannot live, at least this is Alan Taggart's philosophy that I don't live for my job. I do love what I do. I love everything that I'm doing in my job, but I'm not living my life for my work. But that's not, and that some people, like we just said, like you can spend 80 hours a week and that can be something that you're really passionate about and that's what you want to do. But if we're talking about trying to get balance or trying to have time for regular life things like laundry.
It's like, you gotta have clean clothes, Alan.
Right.
I mean, you can go buy underwear every week, but it's easier to just wash it.
Right.
But we don't have house fairies. Someone has to do it.
Exactly.
That is a true mom.
Sorry.
Oh, it's good.
So if folks make it past this phase 1, if they have made it beyond phase 1, we get to enter stage 2, which is the educator phase. And do not confuse this with your job title. This is just, think of it as a classroom educator, because you're starting to come into the realization that you cannot do all of this on your own, but you need to teach others how to do it. You get comfortable in that role of teacher, and but you still have that desire for people to be dependent on you. I am from a state where this matters, but it's a big THE. So the professional versus the professional. Ohio people understand where you go to school matters with that word, but you're the professional, not the professional. So they still rely on you to be the expert, the one that they turn to. So you're teaching others. You have to be the expert. You have to be the decision maker. The volunteers are recipients of your the education you provide them. What I think is interesting on this one is that we're still only programmatically, we're still only able to do things that I'm able to do. So we would never have a crochet class, Emily, because I do not know how to crochet. And I am not prepared for the program to get out from underneath me just yet. So that's kind of my definition of the educator role. Thoughts, comments, opinions on this. I think Marcella and I said yesterday that this is really the phase where you're starting to realize that those boundaries have to kind of come up for you very quickly. And you realize that you can't do all the things. Something has to change. The one thing, Emily mentioned it earlier, I wrote it down, so I need to bring it up now, is normalizing the work week. I think is what they call it in New Mexico, cumulative hours. In Wyoming, we call it professional scheduling. And I'll pick on Emily because she's my self-appointed mentee. And when she was first chosen. Yeah, she chose me. And we talk about just even the normal work day, a day like today, where you don't have any meetings tonight. And Emily would drop her kids off when she first started. She would drop her kids off and she felt awful because she wouldn't go straight to work. She would go to the gym. And she felt like a terrible 4-H educator because she thought she needed to open the office at 8 and work all the way till 10 o'clock at night without any break. And I think the hardest part in this conversation is that you have to do what works best for you, and what works best for you may not work for me. I live in town. I love to take breaks throughout the day intermittently. If you're ever on the phone with me about 3:30 in the afternoon, you know where we're going to get a Frappy or McDonald's or whatever we're going. We're going to get something because we're going to go goof off. And I kind of chunk my day up in that way where I can take breaks throughout the day. Just to get out of here. But for Emily, she goes home at 3 o'clock now and plays with her kids. And I think we all have those strategies that are different. And I hope you guys would share some of those things so that you're not working a complete 16-hour day all at once.
Well, I've kind of changed a little bit in the last few years. I guess with COVID, we kind of got at home, and it's like now we're going back to the office and we're trying to get back into the gear of things. I have 2 little dogs that I just love to cuddle with on the couch now in the morning and then take them on walks. And I used to work 9 to 5 and I eat at my desk. Not a great thing. Don't recommend it for everybody, but I eat at my desk, and then I would go home, or I'd stay for meetings or whatnot. And I've kind of changed anymore. And if I have a 9 o'clock meeting, now you're lucky. I had to bring a trailer to town this morning and had to have it there to be de-runnerized. That's why I'm in my office, because normally at 9, if I have a meeting, I am still at home doing meetings at home. And then I take my dogs on a walk, and then I come to town to work. So some people would disagree, but I don't get to my office normally till 10:30 or 11, but I've already put an hour or so in at home doing meetings or emails or whatnot, and just enjoying my morning and getting going. So that's
great.
Where I'm finding my balance at, is to have that extra time to relax in the morning and just enjoy life when it's quiet in the house.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, I agree with Marla. And I think without the flexibility that this career kind of offers, It wouldn't have been for me when I started. My kids were much younger. And so having that flexibility to go participate in the school things or the sports things was key. And now that they're older and I only have one in high school still, but she can drive and do all the things. And so, and also fortunately, in most regards, I live very close to my office. And so I can walk home and walk the dog at lunchtime, or like now it was, 9 o'clock. I would have buzzed over to the office for this, but I had driven my daughter to work because I have a daughter that's home from college. So we have 3 drivers and 2 vehicles in my house right now. And so that's a juggle, but fortunately I don't usually need a vehicle to drive to work because I can walk. But it's without that flexibility, I think it wouldn't have been a good fit for me. Despite the awesomeness of the cool things I get to do with my job, that was key, was the flexible piece.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. Marcella has some cool things that she makes me jealous about.
Well, conversation wise, so Megan and I had a conversation very recently on the same topic of just looking at our schedules and how things happen and how they go. Reflecting back onto some of the information we talked about earlier, as far as a beginning professional, all the things we think we need to do, but at the same time, this phase in our careers is we've been there, we have a feel of where we're going, we can pick up and go to where we need to be. Interesting part of New Mexico State University is we actually did not have a telework policy prior to the pandemic. So that was one of those, we have to pivot. This is where we need to be. We need to do something with how we can work from distances. Depending on institutions, that's going to be a big conversation to this. So flexibility is something that, talking to Megan, is the professional scheduling aspect of you're working accumulative hours, looking at your work week of how many days and how many hours per se. We only get paid for so many, and we donate so much of our time to this because we love it so much. That's where we're willing to go and do. The other part is we've seen the burnout, but now we're reacting and going back and saying, hold on. Just like Emily said, we need those healthy boundaries. And early on in that conversation is where we need to set that mindset of what's healthy for us and that success. Like Marla said, what does that success look like for us? Because we can maintain and move forward, but are we growing? And are we looking at within different dynamics of this where we're at? Within those strategies, that's a part where unless you've lived through it, that's, as an extension professional, it's hard to share your experiences with an individual who has not worked with an extension. Because even with our campus folks, they're like, you guys do what? You do when? What topics are you talking about? And that whole conversation of I was laughing with Megan. I'm like, we're one of the associations that we normalize having to have a roommate when we travel because of funding. I'm like, we're the only association that mandates that. I'm like, or not mandates it, but normalizes it. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're adults. We should be valuing ourselves a little bit more. And that's kind of me on my soapbox of sorts. But reflecting back to those early ages of extension is now where I'm at in my career. I'm 13 years in. I see and I break out time because I've given so much of my annual leave back to the university of my time. They pay me to take off time, but I'm like, oh no, don't worry about it. But now I'm like, Megan knows, I work like mad for a month and a half or so. And then I take a week off and I just unplug and have to do something because I've seen that burnout. I've faced that burnout in that conversation. So now I'm like, okay, this is where I'm at for me to be healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally, to do my position well.
No, I was just going to say I'm totally on board with that. And that's probably why I've lasted as long as I have in this career, is the flexibility in that. I will work, you work fair, 10, 15 days straight. I have 2 fairs back to back. And I start on a Thursday one and I go 1, 2, 2.5 weeks straight after fair. And you know, that's the great thing. I'm coming up with a trip with some kids and a camp right before that. I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks between the 2 things. Guaranteed, I'm going to take 4 or 5 days off when I get back from that, because I'm giving up my 4th of July holiday and everything. But it's worth it to me to go do these things. And then I can take that time and spend with my family.
Yeah, I was going to say very much the same thing, just recognizing when you're approaching, okay, I need to take a step back. And that was a hard place to do. Like last week, perfect example. Last week was terrible. It was super stressful. Everyone was having a crisis and needed my full attention right at the same moment. And, you know, I'm like, yeah. So I put out all the little fires. And then yesterday, I'm like, not going to work.
Mhm.
I took my little boy to the zoo. I took him out of school and I'm like, we're going, come on. And tell him though, we had like another thing. And I'm like, oh, by the way, you know, those red pandas you're currently obsessing with, let's go see some. And it was the coolest thing ever, because first of all, he's the second child. We never do anything cool with him. Bless his little heart. And he just rolls with it. But also I needed to mentally, like, I talked to Megan yesterday and I talked to our vet yesterday. That's it. Everything else got screened. It's into voicemail. It was kind of great.
Awesome.
But you have to, otherwise you're just gonna set yourself on fire.
That's a good point too, is what I think this is the phase of your career where you start to identify that your cell phone is wonderful for all the fun TikToks you can watch, but also terrible because everyone in the world seems to have access to you via this tracking device, is how I refer to it lovingly. I think this is the stage of your professional development where you set up the rules of cell phone engagement, and I would be curious to know how you all handle that. I applaud Emily because she took my phone call yesterday when I didn't know that she ran away.
And I told you what I was doing and got off the phone.
And then we got off the phone. But how, you know, many of our volunteers are the veterinarian, evidently they all have our cell phone number, certainly email. Do you guys have advice or strategies on how you handle that constant distraction?
Focus mode.
Ignore
I
it.
don't give out my email or my cell phone that often. I know plenty of 4-H professionals that are like, I give my cell phone out so they can get a hold of me wherever. I have a select few volunteer leaders that I give my cell phone number to with the explicit, like, do not give this to anyone else, as I hand it to them. And they don't. They've been respectful of it. And you know, it's more they'll text me more so than call, and then I can decide if I'm going to respond or not. But more often than not, I just say email me, and then I can choose whether I'm going to respond that moment or during the normal work hours.
And I started like that, Ann. So stay there. You know, like I said, when you travel with kids, they've got to have your number in case there's an emergency while you're out. And that, and you need to have theirs so you can contact them and all that. But, and my volunteers, the majority of them now still will even call me and say, hey, so-and-so wants your number. Can I give it to them? And which I am very grateful for. On the other hand, they still text and call me. And that's when I'm like, oh, it's 8 o'clock at night and Priscilla Rice is calling me. Nope, not answering it. And you have to set that boundaries, because there for a while I would talk to her and she'd go till 10:30 and 11 at night. And I'm like, no, I'm in bed. So set that boundaries and say, I will talk to you about work during work hours unless it's an emergency. Then I can text me and let me know it's an emergency. Don't call because I'm going to ignore you.
Or I'm going to wait to hear what your voicemail is and make my decision upon hearing the voicemail.
Well, I don't even necessarily listen to the voicemails. It's after hours. I'm off work. I have a life. So you can leave a voicemail. Next day, I'll listen to it. But if it's an emergency, you better text me. Like, hey, how do we file an American Income Life? We had a kid come off a horse or something. We can talk that. But if you want to just say, hey, what color should I wear tomorrow? It's National 4-H Week. Figure it out.
So adding to strategies is something that I do. So I try like Anne not to share my cell phone information, but with Marla, I understand you need that information out there when you're the sole adult in charge of children. So I make it more challenging for myself to access work. So with NMSU systems, I do not have my email hooked up to my cell phone because we need to do a double authentications. It just adds that little bit more challenging. If I need to check a work email on my phone, then I got to go through the whole double authentication process, which for me, it's enough that I'm like, well, do I really need to? Do I not? So that's little things that I prevent myself from doing because I make it harder on myself. But if I'm at work and I get a cell phone call, if it's a colleague, I'll answer it. If it's a volunteer, I'm at the office. There's the office phone, 8 to 5, somebody's here to answer those questions.
That's really good. I turned my the ding off of my emails on my phone because I'm not quite ready to part with it just yet. But it's amazing where I'm at now in this, because you kind of suggested it to me, I think. So I turned the dinger off on it so I don't know when I get an email. And now I feel like I'm always behind in email. Like I have a good friend and she only checks her email at like 10 and 3. And so I've been trying to pick that habit up too. I'm failing all around on email. Email is just terrible for me. But I love that I don't, because you hear that ding and you think you feel obligated to check it. Even if you don't need to check it, even if you don't have time to check it, you still check it because that's what the phones have taught us to do. Jump when they
You've been Pavloved.
I have a love-hate relationship with my phone.
Yes. Alan, do you have any boundaries or strategies to share?
I have established, so Google Voice is a program where you could attach it to your phone, and I made my work number. I'm making air quotes with my fingers right now for those on the listening to the podcast, that I'm able to have like a work number that still goes to my cell phone. And I give that out freely because I can, switch it off. And, but again, like try to make those boundaries where if people are texting me or contacting me, try to make sure that I'm not, unless it's an absolute, like you said, someone just came off a horse or someone's bleeding or, something's on fire. Then otherwise it's okay. It can wait. And I, can still respond. In my personal philosophy, 24 hours, you don't need to immediately respond. You can still respond within 24 hours and it'll be okay. So that's my way of handling stuff too.
I feel like we're going to have to dedicate an entire podcast to teaching Emily how to set up the Google phone on her cell phone.
I'm shook.
You're
I
shook?
was like, what?
I want to learn.
It's free.
What is life-changing information, Alan? Have you been withholding it?
No, I thought it was totally, we talked about it when I was in Idaho for a Zoom strategy, or for working from home. They're like, yeah, Google Voice is free. Just sign up and choose your number. And yeah, so, but I believe Wyoming, you guys already have a Google subscription as a university. So it might already be included for y'all. I would just, it's part of the Google suite, just Google Voice, or if you have your own Gmail account, that's all you need.
It's free and you can text and other like regular cell phone features.
Right. So it's an
Wow.
app on your phone, essentially.
This is ridiculous.
Man, podcasts are so great.
Okay,
We're
I want to
all
know.
learning.
Teach me.
They don't
Okay,
leave me alone.
We will. Yeah, I could send some links your way. There's
Yeah,
it's just,
put it in the
yeah,
chat. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I will say, I don't know if this is going to be included in the recording or if someone's going to cut it out, but there's a feature that I used to have that's default, where when someone calls your Google Voice number, they have to say their name so you know who it is, and it also helps screen like those robocalls. And so it helps that way. But I kept getting complaints from my volunteers saying, what is this system that I have to keep saying my name? And so I just turned it off, and I don't get any issues. They just call straight to the number. So yeah, highly recommend it. If you have a smartphone, it's a great tool, and happy to send some stuff your way.
Okay.
We'll have to put that in our notes section of our podcast.
There you go.
Revolution.
sorry.
An old dog new tricks, right?
Absolutely.
I just assumed everyone knew. I'm glad that I was of use to you guys. That's great.
That's
you go.
right.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We have split this topic into 2 parts. This is part 1. Please join us for the next episode for part 2 as we explore stages 3 and 4.
This has been a 2022 production of the NAE 4-H YDP Western Region.
The West is the best. Please join us for our next episode.